This is a typo. It should say topic number 7, angle properties of parallel lines. So just a recap of what you learned in Algebra 1, parallel lines are never going to intersect and they're going to have the same slope. And if you look at this little picture I drew over here, those little red arrows on lines means that they are parallel, and that means that they'll never intersect. So it is very important for today that you're given parallel lines, because nothing today that I say will be true if the lines are not parallel. Okay? So I'm going to kind of ignore a lot of these words, but go through this example together. We'll get to it all eventually. So recall that we learned previous videos and previous classes. You've learned that vertical angles, those are going to be congruent, right? Vertical angles make that x, and we know that the ones that are across from each other are congruent, okay? Angles that form a line, those are going to add to 180 degrees. So this is something that we've known before, and now let's use that to help us figure out what's going on. So before I read what we're given, let's look at this picture down here, okay? Things that I notice, we have the parallel lines, right? Those are parallel, okay? But I also notice if I ignore this whole bottom line there, don't cross it out, what I see is I see that familiar x that we're used to with vertical angles. So I should know right away that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4, and that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, because those are across from each other, right? And now let's look at what we're given. Up here it says when lines are parallel, when parallel lines are cut by a transversal, I know that corresponding angles are congruent. Well, last week you learned that corresponding angles, or last class, that 1 and 5 are corresponding, and that means that they're congruent. So I know that angle 1 and angle 5 are going to be the same measure, okay? Another way that we can think about this is, remember when I was saying like this group of 4, if we slide this down directly onto that group of 4, it's the same thing. So if that group of 4 is red, red, blue, blue, then this group of 4 is red, red, blue, blue, also to match its corresponding angles, okay? So now let's read the directions and actually see what it's asking us to solve for. So it says, in the diagram, line M is parallel to line K. We knew that, right? They are cut by transversal T. We can bold that transversal T like we're used to. Using what we know about straight angles and vertical angles, find the measures of angles 5, 6, and 7. Well, that's pretty easy if I've already had my tick marks, right? So I gave you 112 down here. That means that this blue angle is 112 because it's vertical. And then it says what we know about straight angles. We know that 6 and 7, those form a straight angle. They're going to add to 180. So 180 minus 112, I believe that gets you 68. So that means that my red angles are 68 degrees, okay? And now, since we know corresponding angles are congruent, right, the measure of angle 2, we should know that, okay? We should actually know all 4 of those angles, because this group of 4 down here is going to slide up and match exactly what that group of 4 is up there. So the blue angles are 112, and the red angles are 68. And then I am done. I have found the measure of angle 2, which was 112, and I did angle 1, 3, and 4, like the directions had asked. Okay? So now let's use the fact that the facts that I have in this picture, and let's fill out some facts that we now know about the relationships that we learned last class. So now we can generalize this and say that corresponding angles, well, I told you that, those ones are going to be congruent. Okay? And looking up at your picture, what you should notice is that alternate interior angles are also going to be congruent. Okay? Both of them, I think there was one pair that was 68 and one pair that was 112. Alternate exterior angles, they'll also be congruent. If you look up at the picture, the same thing happens. One of them is going to be 112 and one of the other pairs will be 68. And now what I know, let's look at the same side. And I gave you a little hint right here and here, but before I get to that hint, same side, those are going to be supplementary. Okay, supplementary means we're adding to 180, right? So both same side interior and same side exterior are going to be 180, are going to be supplementary. And the way that I remember this is that same side sup, right? We have SSS, SSS, S. So I always say to myself, same side sup, and then the rest of the relationships are congruent. Okay, so if it doesn't have that same side sup in it, then it's congruent. That's my little memory trick for you. So now let's actually find some angle measurements and solve some problems with these relationships. This practice is going to be pretty quick. Notice it says the directions up here says fill in the blank with the correct classification, right? So I have to figure out what is the relationship first, and then find the measure of the angle indicated, and that's indicated by a question mark. So my 5 options for relationships are here. But remember, the thing that we're always checking is that, there we go, I have those parallel lines. So looking at number 1, I have my parallel lines, the angle that's given to me, and my question mark. Those would be alternate interior angles. I'm just going to abbreviate for the sake of time, right? Alternate interior. And we know now that alternate interior angles are congruent, so that means that my question mark is 84 degrees. And that's it. That's all I have to do, okay? I figured out what the relationship is, and I found the missing angle, okay? You also, if it helps, could do those tick marks like we did in the beginning, right? I know that these are congruent, the green, and I know that the blues are congruent, right? And then that's going to directly move down into my lower group of 4. The greens are congruent, and the blues are congruent. And look at that, 84 and the question mark are both green, which means they're equal, right? 84 and 84. But let's continue with the way that we're just learned now. So I have my parallel lines. It's okay for them to have one triangle. And I'm looking at 47 and the question mark. Those look like they are alternate exterior this time. Well, I know that alternate exterior angles are congruent, so that means that this angle is 47, and I am done, okay? All right, let's look at the next 2. All right, so I gave you the parallel lines, and we know we have 53 and the question mark. Those 2 angles are corresponding, right? And we know corresponding angles are congruent, so that means if the top one's 53, the bottom one's also 53. It's the same. And again, I'm done. Okay? Let's look at number 4. I have 100 and I have the question mark. Ooh, okay. Those are now same side interior angles. And now remember my little memory trick here. Same side, that was supplementary. Okay? So this question mark is not 100. I have to do 180, subtract 100, and I get 80 degrees for my unknown angle. Okay? So that's kind of the level 1 practice. What we're really going to do is we're going to have to look at pictures and set up equations to solve for x and solve for missing angles. So let's go do some of that now. So let's flip the page. And now I'm actually only going to do the first 2 examples just for the sake of time and getting you guys to go to the practice. But what's important to look at is I gave you some steps up here to solve equations with parallel lines. So the first step is going to be to label the diagram. All right, so let's actually just look at the steps while looking at the first problem. So it's given, I gave you 2 angle measurements, right? KJH, and I gave you OMP. Okay? The first thing I'm going to do is label the diagram. So KJH, you can see I've already kind of helped you label that. I'm going to put x plus 14 in there, okay? And then OMP is right here, so I'm going to put 2x plus 16 there, all right? So I've labeled the diagram. My second step is to identify the angle relationship, and that's one of my angle relationships that I have here. Looking at my 2 orange expressions, notice those are same side, and they're both exterior, okay? So I'm actually going to write that down, same side, exterior. Well, now let's look at letter C. I know the angle relationship is same side, exterior. Letter C says to set up an equation. Well, we just learned that if my lines are parallel, right, that means that I know we have same side. That means that they're supplementary. So when we write equations for supplementary angles, we say one angle plus the other angle equals 180 degrees. So my first angle is x plus 14, and my second angle is 2x plus 16, and there's my equation. And now we can solve. Let's combine like terms. That's my last step, right? Step D is to solve. Combine like terms becomes 3x, I think that's plus 30, equals 180. Subtract 30 from both sides. I'm just going to move over here, and I get 3x equals 150. Divide by 3, and I get x equals 50 degrees. X equals just 50. All right? And notice I kind of skipped over this, but my directions were asking me to find x. I found x, so I am done. Okay? Let's look at one more example down below. All right, so example 2. Example 2 gives me two angle measurements again. It gives me a picture with parallel lines, and it's asking me to find x, but this time also to find all missing angles after. But let's focus on the first part first. So finding x, the first thing I'm going to do is label ACD. They gave me that was 7x minus 13, right? That's not C. CFG, that's right here. That's 2x plus 17. Okay? Once I label, let's think about that angle relationship. So one's on the inside, one's on the outside, and they're both on the same side. I think that whenever I have that one inside, one outside, I'm going to think about that corresponding, right? And those angles, right, if I move that down, that group of 4, directly down to the bottom of group of 4, they would land in the same place, so they are corresponding. And now when we go to set up an equation, we know that corresponding angles are congruent. So whenever we write equations of things that are congruent, we say that something equals something else. That's what it means to be congruent. So I know these angles are congruent, so 7x minus 13 is going to equal 2x plus 17. And then we can solve from here. Let's bring the x's to both sides, and I get 5x minus 13 equals 17. Add the 13. I'm just going to move over here. 5x equals, I think, 30. Divide by 5, and x is going to equal 6. So I found x, which is good, okay, but the directions say to find all of the missing angles. Well, remember, whenever the directions say find all of the missing angles, that means I need to evaluate. I need to plug in, right? I'm going to pick the bottom expression here because it's a little bit nicer. So 2 times 6 plus 17, that's 12 plus 17. I believe that is 29 degrees. So that means that this angle right here was 29 degrees. And if I want to find the rest of my angles, let's go all the way back to the first type of example we did, right? I know that these angles are equal and that these angles are equal. And then I know that the top group of 4 matches the bottom group of 4. So I can make my tick marks look like this. So if those one tick mark angles were 29, I also know that these are all 29. Now how do I find the other group of angles here, right? How do I find this angle down here? Well, I know that 29 plus whatever that angle is, that is 180 because it's making that straight line here, right? So I can do 180 minus 29, and I believe that gets me 151. So the rest of my angles are all going to be the same, and they're all going to be 151 degrees, okay? So at this point, you can head on and practice 1.8, and then 1.9 is just a mixed practice of what we've done in the entire unit to help prepare you for your test. So you should be able to do the entire pink homework packet now, and then you'll be ready to take the test. Good luck.